Page 147, Chapter 10, The Visitor, continued. The air in the cabin was thick with the stink of disease, but the hearth was warm. Nokomis had the sick ones arranged in their bedding, blankets pulled neatly up to their chins, mats clean on the floor all around the fire. Although Nokomis sat next to Mama in a stupor of exhaustion and did not at first speak to Omakayas, she nodded encouragingly at Angeline, who slept easily now, her fever broken, her hands limp on her blanket. Omakayas crouched beside her. That's when she saw that the beautiful face of her sister was covered with ugly sores and vivid bumps, and her mouth, when she opened it to breathe, showed that her gums bled painfully and stained her teeth red. Her hair was caught in a thick mat, but she was alive. Her breath moved steadily in and out. Mama slept, also covered with sores, unconscious and still in the depth of her danger. Pinch kept tossing off his covers or dragging at Mama's. With a weary, loving, unthinking movement that showed she had done this thousands of times before, Nokomis replaced the blankets, held a tin cup of water to Pinch's lips, trickled a little water between Mama's lips and Angeline's. Day slumped over by the fire. She did not disturb except to lower him to the earth. Motioning to Omakayas, she indicated Niwu, who was trembling now, his tiny arms and legs moving jerkily as the heat in his body increased and increased until he had not the strength to even cry. Keep holding him, said Nokomis tenderly, giving Niwu to Omakayas, seating them by the fire. She placed her dry, old, cool hand on the back of Omakayas' head. Just keep holding him, she said again. And so Omakayas did. She held Niwu through the night, dozing with him, waking when he thrashed, cleaning him, bathing with cool water his forehead and his tiny, straining, bony chest, his clenched hands and his beautiful feet. She held him when he melted into a troubled sleep, when his breath rasped, when his cough deepened, when he cried and cried until his voice was gone. She held him when he grew still and quiet, too quiet, when his fever came back. One day passed, another blurred, and still she held her little brother, held him close in her arms. She held him as he looked mysteriously into her face, his eyes huge. She held him when he spat up blood, when he whimpered for Andeg, who sat high up in the roof beams, head underneath his wing. She held him through another night, held him when his chest went drum-tight and he struggled for breath, held him when he drew that breath deep from the heart. She held him when he died. She held him close. She didn't know exactly when his life went, except that Andeg croaked 3 times, longingly, as though for his playmate. Then Omakayas knew that something had changed. Her little brother's body no longer warmed her with its heat. They were the same temperature, and then he was colder. Still, she did not let him go. Nokomis had to take him from her arms, and when she did, Omakayas fell down on the blanket, arms still held in the cradle shape of her brother, and knew nothing all that day. It was night when she awoke. Opening her eyes, she knew at once what had happened, and the bleak knowledge had made her shut her eyes again. Maybe, almost, she wished that she were sick, too, that she could join him. For Nokomis had said that the Ojibwa must walk a path that leads out of this life into the next, and since Niwu couldn't walk very well yet, who would carry him when he got tired, when he fell? Who would make sure he was fed in the other world? Who would make him toy dolls to dance? Who would care for him when he was lost? The answer, once she had risen, once she began working with Nokomis to care for her family, was a sad answer. Old Tallow brought the news later that day. She set 4 snared rabbits down near the door, then waited to speak. Tin Snow is gone, she said. On the road to the next world, surely, she and Niwu would meet, thought Omakayas, tears blinding her as she tipped water to her father's lips. Surely Tin Snow would take hold of Niwu's hand, swinging him up in her arms, carrying him along past the rough spots and danger, to the place where they would be safe. Old Tallow took the horn spoon from Omakayas and ordered her to lie down, to sleep. She made Nokomis lie down as well in the corner with her grandchild. You 2 rest now. Go on, or I'll take a stick to you. Her voice was fierce, rasping, anger, and strong. Nokomis obeyed her, sank into the skins, and slept before her head touched the back of her blanket. Omakayas was glad to do the same. Old Tallow then proceeded to work. She built up the fire high to a greater heat than Nokomis had dared, for she knew she could chop more wood as needed. She brought a new kettle of water in, skinned her rabbits by the light of the fire, and boiled them for a nourishing soup. She cleaned every corner the way she never cleaned her own house. She left her dogs to run wild and tended every need, cared for the humans she loved, and although she never would admit it, loved even more than she loved her dogs. Old Tallow's work helped them, but the next day she left once more to hunt. Nokomis weakened, though she wasn't ill. Almachias alone was left to tend to the sick ones. She had to keep the fire going, haul the water, cover them, bathe them down, comfort them when they were restless. She hardly slept an hour at a time. First one needed her, then the other, then a third, the first again. There was no stopping. Their cries were pitiful. When the terrible itching that gave the disease its name started, Almachias wrapped their hands with cloth, bit down their fingers, anything to keep them from scarring themselves. The itching nearly drove them from their minds. Pinch was worse, and he weakened so badly that Nokomis was afraid for him. Night and day, one of the others sat with him and did not let go of his hand for fear he would run to the land of the spirits. Even Andeg seemed to sense how close Pinch was to death. Andeg perched near Pinch as though keeping guard. Every time Pinch slipped too far away, the bird croaked, "Gago, Pinch!" One stubborn eye flared open, and Pinch fixed his annoyed little boy glare upon the bird. He was mad, but he got well. "Gago, Pinch! Gago, Gago!" called Andeg. What he really meant was, "Don't go. Stay here." One night, Almachias woke to see Day trying to rise to his feet. In the dim light of the low fire, she saw him throw off his blankets. He tried to stagger outside. She knew that was certain death. Many died of this sickness when they became so fevered that they lost their minds and threw off blankets and walked outside to freeze. "Please, Day," she said to draw him back. He sank on all fours but kept crawling determinedly toward the door, groaning, hair wild. His eyes did not know her, and his face was frightful. He clawed at the door, fell to his knees, got up on his knees. This time he was so determined that Almachias knew there was no way she could save him from going outside. He was too strong for her, even in his sickness. "Gaween Onjita," she said. "I'm sorry." Raising a block of wood high, she brought it down on his head with all of her strength. He crumpled to the ground. Almachias sobbed as she dragged his blankets to him and covered him. He was too heavy to drag near the fire. For a long time she kneeled next to him, praying him to live. She loved him, her Day. What would they do without him? Back in her own blankets, she immediately sank into a fierce oblivion. When she woke, it was morning. Instantly she remembered the night before. Was her father dead? Had her blow killed him? Fear gripped her as she crept to his side, put her hand on his lips. His breath came evenly. He seemed a little better, even, than the day before. As the morning went on, he sipped broth for the first time, opened his eyes. "My little frog," he smiled, closing his eyes again, this time to sleep comfortably. "You could bring down a bear with the strength in your club." His fever was broken at last. Almachias' constant attention brought the little family through the first part of the illness's danger. One by one they improved, all because of her careful nursing. Later it was the vaccine of Reverend Hall, fetched from the mainland, that guarded the rest of the Ojibwa who had been exposed and survived the smallpox of 1847. 18 Ojibwa died to the disease, and one tried to kill himself by other means. That man was Fishtail. No one had understood it of him, but his wife was everything. When Tinsnow left him, Fishtail would not leave her body. He slashed his arms and was found in the blanket beside her, half alive. He survived, but once he had the strength, he cut off his long, thick, splendid hair. He buried it with the sweet woman who was called Tinsnow, not because of her own skin was white, nor because she had much of anything to do with snow at all, but because the kind assurance of her nature had reminded her neighbors of the way the deep snow covers and forgives all it touches when it falls.